Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Now, amid the heightened tensions between the de facto Afghan authorities, which are the Afghan Taliban, and Pakistan, because of the inaction of Afghan Taliban, despite the repeated request of the Pakistan's authorities to take a concrete and decisive action against the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, we know that there are some key U.S. officials who are visiting Pakistan. These include the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of Population, Refugees and Migration, and then later on U.S. Special Envoy to Afghanistan and Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary. They will be visiting Pakistan. Now, Pakistan's Foreign Office spokesperson Mumtaz Zahra Baloch says, let me quote her, that Pakistan and the United States continue to hold consultations on a range of issues. To advance those consultations, exchange of visits also takes place. Now, these visits are part of the ongoing dialogue with the U.S. on a range of issues, unquote. Likewise, a statement by the U.S. State Department says, let me quote it, that Assistant Secretary of State Noyes will travel to Islamabad for 4th to 7th of December and will discuss shared efforts to protect vulnerable individuals and accelerated safe, efficient relocation and resettlement of Afghan refugees in the U.S. immigration pipeline, unquote. Now, since the Kabul takeover by the Afghan Taliban back in August 2021, there has been a considerable spike of terror attacks in Pakistan. Pakistani authorities have repeatedly been impressing upon the de facto authorities in Afghanistan to take a concrete action against the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. And in these terrorist incidents that took place in Pakistan, many Afghan nationals were also found involved. But on the contrary, despite repeated calls by the Pakistani authorities, Afghan Taliban and their top leadership have been denying the presence of the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan on Afghanistan's soil. Also, we know that there was a deadline that was announced by the Pakistani authorities till 31st of October for the dignified repatriation of all the illegal immigrants residing in Pakistan. Since the expiry of that deadline, this particular drive to deport those illegal immigrants also continues. Now, in today's program, we'll be talking about the significance of the engagements between the U.S. officials and Pakistani authorities, and what could be the likely understandings and the outcomes, and how the U.S. can help Pakistan deal with the menace of terrorism, and ideally, what sort of an approach could be expected from the de facto authorities of Afghanistan, the Afghan Taliban, and also when it comes to the relocation and the resettlement of those Afghans with which the U.S. had promised, what had been the responsibility of the U.S. and what had the U.S. authorities done so far in that particular regard. For that, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Mr. Aniq Zafar. He is senior analyst. Mr. Zafar, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. At the same time, on Skype, we are being joined by Dr. Jamil Khan. He is former ambassador. Dr. Khan, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Now, let me begin the discussion with you, Dr. Khan. Mr. Zafar, if you allow me, let me first go to Dr. Khan. Dr. Khan, now, as we know, one of the key officials of the U.S. side is already in Pakistan. She'll be staying here till 7th of December. And now, when we talk about vis-a-vis the situation in Afghanistan, especially after the international troops withdrawal and the Kabul's takeover by the Afghan Taliban, how important do you think these engagements between the U.S. and Pakistan are, and what could be the likely outcomes in this particular episode?
It's a series and sequence of engagement with Pakistan, with the Pakistan has with the U.S. counterparts, and it's one in that direction. It comes at a very significant point now, because now the situation is getting a little more precarious, because on one hand, the U.S. Is contesting that the Afghan refugees which were being repatriated, this is one of the things that would be discussed in the forthcoming visit, that Pakistan's decision to repatriate all illegal or undocumented foreigners in our country and somehow most of them happen to be Afghan national. You have already said it in your intro that the resettlement of repatriation and resettlement of the Afghan nationals, particularly those who had collaborated with the NATO forces and U.S. forces. So their cases are in the pipeline. Now their cases are in the pipeline last 2 years. I think this time they are going to the Pakistan Foreign Office and the visiting officials from United States. They would try and iron out to ensure that those who are in the pipeline, their cases should be expedited and accelerated by the United States. And if there is any anomaly about that of some of the nationals who fall in that category, they're going to be in bulk, as a matter of fact. Pakistan perhaps is going to stick to that because that's definitely it falls under the Geneva Convention. It's fallen under the Geneva Convention on Refugees, that those people, illegal or undocumented foreigners, if they are being repatriated for whatever reasons, and if they have any threat to their life and in the country of their origin, then their cases are considered under another covenant international instrument, which is the political right of an individual. So I think this one aspect, there's a range of other aspects because the geopolitical situation, the way it is brewing up in this region, this meeting, which is now with the special representative, followed by special representative after the initial meeting of the Assistant Secretary of State for Population, Refugees, and Migration. Then it's being followed by the special representative of Afghanistan, Mr. Hom. And then this is going to be the decision-making meeting in a way that the special envoy has a very rich experience of Afghanistan. He stayed during the NATO forces and the US forces operation there in Afghanistan. He was embedded in Kunar, and he continued to be there as a diplomat to give assistance to its country from there. So now that he is a special envoy and he's also served on the Asia desk, he has been a political officer in Islamabad and the embassy of US. So all if we try and connect, and in that case, I would assume that there would be some decision making, or at least there would be some stride towards reaching to some conclusion decision on the disagreements, which diplomatic disagreement which Pakistan has on with some of the countries, principally or the chiefly the United States, which is objecting on some of these matters. The second point is that Taliban and its obligation towards the Security Council resolution, which was passed soon after they assumed the power. The Taliban had assumed the power as to what all they have to do once they assume the power, which means the children right, the women right, the education, and the Afghan soil not to be used and utilized by the terrorist groups. Now, the latest monitoring team, Security Council monitoring report, very clearly indicates that there are about 20 different terrorist group which is operating in Afghanistan. TTP on the top of it, which is directly impacting and affecting Pakistan. US, the United States monitoring team had mentioned about the activities of TTP in Pakistan and its support from the soil of Afghanistan. So that becomes a very cardinal point for Pakistan to discuss it with the United States and seek their assistance, because whatever is happening in Pakistan at this point in terms of terrorism, as we all know how much we have suffered, and we have suffered hugely, 80,000 people and about more than $145 billion impact.
Separately on both of those points, separately regarding the resettlement and the relocation when it comes to the responsibility of the US, as well as when we talk about the kind of contentious issue Pakistan has with the interim Afghan authorities regarding containing or dismantling the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. Let me proceed towards Mr. Zafar. Mr. Zafar, now how important when it comes to the situation in Afghanistan, especially the withdrawal of international troops and takeover by the Taliban? They had made the international commitment. How important are the engagements vis-a-vis Afghanistan between the US and Pakistan?
Well, US and Pakistan have been partners in fight against terrorism, and this partnership was established in early 2000s. And we are well aware that throughout the Afghan war, in which US troops and NATO troops, international security forces were present in Afghanistan, Pakistan was helping these forces fight against Taliban. But again, when these forces left, there was an agreement in Doha. That agreement was not fulfilled by Taliban later. Once, and also the pull-out was quite chaotic by the US forces. That resulted into sudden collapse of government in Kabul, and Afghan National Army also disappeared. So Taliban had an easy run. But since Taliban have not fulfilled all the criteria in the Doha agreement, we right now are in a situation where I think no country in the world recognizes Afghan Taliban as legitimate rulers. They are de facto rulers, but they are not accepted all over the world as de jure rulers. That's why recent hurdles in Moscow or in Herat, the Herat dialogue in central, somewhere in Central Asia, did not include Afghan Taliban, and Afghan Taliban were quite upset about it. So Pakistan and US interaction over these issues is very important when it comes to some of the Afghan refugees, which I suspect are somewhere about 25,000 Afghan refugees who are in Pakistan and who are to be relocated to US. And since last 2 years, US has not been able to process their documents. So Pakistan cannot be cannot become a host which does not know when will this end, when will these people be repatriated or relocated. Similarly, many other European countries, Western countries have had commitments that they will be relocating these people in their countries, but these if we go around in Islamabad particularly, you can see that Islamabad's residential buildings, hotels, guest houses, all have been occupied by these people since last 2 years. This is also very unfair with them. They are not uncertain about their future. So these countries should now decide what to do with these people.
As you already mentioned, there are around 25,000 Afghans who are waiting to be relocated to the US.
Only to US, yes.
Oh, only to the US, right?
Yeah.
Ali, according to their Bureau of Population, Refugees and Migration, there are around 90,000 since their withdrawal from Afghanistan they took in. They were given the temporary residence over there. Now the extension hasn't been granted because the Afghan Adjustment Act, the piece of legislation proposed by the Biden administration to grant the permanent residency, is still stalled in the Congress. Do you think after this particular fact, that they haven't been able to give that extension to already those Afghans who are present in the US, will the US be able to take these 25,000?
This is again a very sort of a contentious part of legislation in the US, that because it's a very divisive house right now. So creating consensus around it is not going to be easy. But again, this is a legal problem, but this problem resides in the US. We have no influence to make it happen. What we can do is we can tell the US that we are no more capable of hosting these people.
If you allow me, let me once again proceed towards Dr. Khan, Dr. Jamil Khan. Now, since this particular legislation is stalled in the Congress in the US already taking around 90,000 Afghans, but they haven't been given a sort of an extension after the lapse of 2 years. Now, as Mr. Zafar has mentioned, that there are around 25,000 who are waiting for their relocation from Pakistan to the United States of America. Do you think with that stalled process in the Congress, in the US, for those 90,000 Afghans who are waiting for that extension, is the US in a position to take more from other countries, especially when we talk about these 25,000 from Pakistan?
Well, the president has a huge power in terms of taking one-time exemption from the Congress. And I think these efforts and these steps, what we are discussing now, the visit of the special envoy, which is a special representative of US to Afghanistan, Mr. Tom West, 7 to 9 December, and followed by another very important State Department official, which is the Principal Deputy Secretary, Elizabeth Horst, 9 to 12 December. I think these visits would consolidate some of these points, and that would help the Congress and the President of the United States to take a decision about it. In fact, that's their obligation. That's their obligation under the international instrument, which I just mentioned on refugees. So those obligations, and these are the occasions, these are the platforms as these three visits, three very important visits are taking place, connected with each other, although separate. But then this would cover predominantly this Afghan resettlement, Afghan refugees issue, and the Doha Agreement and its consequences, and the Security Council resolution, two resolutions, one in August 2022, 21, and then September 2021, and then 22. So these were certain resolutions which are to be discussed, and some decision is to be taken. And in addition, there are certain multilateral obligations starting from the Security Council Resolution 1267, and followed this has further been augmented by 1989 resolution number 1989, which is the 2011, in which individuals and entities of Al-Qaeda and some of the freezing of their assets. So these are those multi-layered kind of a discussion which keeps taking place. And then there are many more Security Council resolutions about which the monitoring team has been reporting from time to time. But in our advantage, and the recent one is very important in terms of TTP. And once we talk about TTP, we know our neighboring country, what support is being extended to TTP, and what support is being extended to by the Taliban, although they don't admit to it. So probably US would be in a better position to assert its influence on some of those countries who are directly or indirectly supporting TTP. In light of that recent monitoring Security Council monitoring team report, which is very candid in terms of what is the role and responsibilities of Taliban, Afghan Taliban, towards the TTP. And there were certain reports which were published in past, in which our neighboring countries, particularly India, has been pinpointed in some informal papers where they've been involved supporting the elements in Afghanistan, or at Afghanistan, which is working against Pakistan. So, as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson has mentioned, that there are a range of issues, but then more important issues are the one which we just discussed about relocation and resettlement as one aspect. But at the same time, as I initially mentioned, that the geopolitical situation in and around us, that probably would also be touched upon during these very important visits of the US official. And Pakistan, I'm sure, is going to pursue and follow what they've been advocating in past by relying on the international instruments, as I said, international agreement. So this is a good chance for us, and we have our special envoy to Afghanistan, Mr. Durrani, and he, I'm sure, would be fully prepared to advocate and present our case. Yes.
Dr. Jamil Khan, former ambassador, joining us on Skype. Thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. I really appreciate that. Mr. Zafar, now going back to the same question, do you really think the US is in position to take those 25,000 waiting to be relocated to the United States of America from Pakistan, given the fact the extension to already 90,000 has been granted?
I mean, it does not. It should not be concern of Pakistan whether the US is able to do it or not. What we need to do is that we need to negotiate and sit on the table with the US and ask them about a timetable at least, that when will these people will be transported, because after all, these people being here, they are living here, they are utilizing resources here, they are not working here. They may be spending some money, but how long will they be able to survive here without those funds? We are very well aware. It is a documented fact that many people, if you have seen in front of the press club in Islamabad, many people are living in camps now because they cannot afford staying in the hotels or guest houses. They cannot rent places. Those people who have money and who have been able to rent houses and guest houses and all that, that has created another kind of dynamic in Islamabad, where rentals for houses and apartments have shot up. So all these are impacts which Pakistanis are facing. So Pakistan has to first think about Pakistani people, right? And US, if it wants to keep these people here for say next 6 months or 1 year, there should be a mechanism, there should be a framework. How will they stay here? What will be the economic support which Pakistan will get to sustain its resources to support these people? So all these questions have to be on the table, right? And then US also has to engage with Pakistan, as rightly said, Ambassador Jamil rightly said, on elimination of terrorism.
Elimination of terrorism, that's a very pertinent point. I'll definitely come to that particular point before heading into that. Now, why do you think when we talk about that required legislation in the US in order to give that extension or the permanent residence to those temporary resident Afghans, 90,000 of them, what has kept the US administration or the US system not to go for that legislation swiftly and not work that problem out so far?
Obviously, immigration is a huge issue in the US. You know that this is an issue in the elections. Elections are coming up, right? And giving permanent residency or stay to a number of people in US, that is always going to be a contentious issue between various stakeholders in the US. Republicans have a different position, Democrats have a different position, and right now before the elections, whether Democrats will risk doing that, I will doubt that, because Republicans then will use it as an election point that, look, already 125,000, 115,000 people have been granted a status inside US, and then obviously they have a continuous propaganda or a position that more people from other countries will benefit from such legislations, because making a legislation which is only specific to Afghans is going to be very difficult. So if legislation is a little bit wider, then of course then other people will be benefiting from that. So these are very critical issues in the US, because these can be challenged in the courts and all that.
So do you think, given the fact that you've mentioned that the elections are also around the corner, is going to be really a contentious issue, it could be also getting the criticism of the Republicans also, is there any sort of an option for the Biden administration at this point in time that it could navigate through this particular challenge?
Well, it depends on the political will. Of course, in the Senate and in the Congress, both parties, whenever there is a legislation, both parties have to cooperate, because the composition of the houses are such that no one party can sort of sail through all the legislation. So they will have to cooperate with each other. What can Biden administration offer them in return, that is to be seen. But again, as I said, that in the current environment, it may not be very easy.
So do you think if given the permanent residency with this particular required legislation, if it goes through, it might have an impact in swaying the results of the election also?
Well,
in terms of numbers.
Again, once the election year kicks in, how many issues and which issues come up, we will have to see. But as I mentioned earlier and pointed out, that the question of immigration, legal or illegal or whatever, is a huge subject, particularly for the Republicans.
But the question
they try to contest this election on this platform. Obviously, their main focus is on immigration from the Latin American countries, less focus on other countries, because huge migration comes from those countries. But again, when there is a discussion around immigration, then every sort of immigration is discussed.
So now the question of election comes to the fore right now as we speak, right? So what over the last 2 years, why has the Biden administration or the concerned departments haven't been able to process the entire system for these 90,000 Afghans they had already taken?
I'm not very sure that what stops them from doing it, but it has to do with the legislative process in the US, which is often very lengthy, and until unless there is bipartisan support, it is not easy to sail through these legislations. So I haven't looked into it much, but I would say that it is the usual US bureaucratic and legislative inertia which often comes in when it is about the problem which is for others, which larger American society thinks that it's not our problem, this is some other problem.
Right. Going back to the same very important issue for Pakistani authorities and the Pakistani nation, the menace of terrorism. There has been a considerable spike in terror attacks in different parts of the country. Many Afghan nationals been found involved in it. Then there was a dignified repatriation drive on the part of the Pakistani authorities of all the illegal immigrants, the coincidence of which happens to be most of them happen to be of the Afghan origin. Now, when we talk about the US role in this particular regard, how do you think the US can impress upon the Afghan Taliban to fulfill their commitment they made to the international community after they took over Kabul? Is there any way the US can pursue that, specifically given the fact that the US officials met with the Taliban officials on 31st of July in 2023. That was the first ever high-level engagement between the Afghan authorities and the US officials since the Afghan Taliban took over Kabul. And the US delegation had acknowledged that there had been a decrease in the large-scale terrorist attacks against the Afghan civilians. So that means there was a decrease within Afghanistan. But what about that uptick in terror attacks in the neighboring countries, most specifically in Pakistan?
Going back to Doha Agreement, as I mentioned, that one of the key part of Doha Agreement was that Afghan Taliban will not allow any terror organization to operate out of its of Afghan soil. This is a key point which I think Afghan Taliban have not really been able to fulfill. As for the internal security situation, that obviously was meant to improve, because the only other group right now which so to say is somewhat not aligned with the Taliban is Daesh, right, which does not have that kind of strength that it can destabilize whole of Afghanistan or whole of Pakistan. It is, as compared to TTP or Afghan Taliban of the Yor, it is a very small organization. It is not as large, but TTP is residing in Afghanistan. Similarly, some of the other terror groups which are linked to other countries, for example ETIM Uzbeks related terror organization and all that. Those are residing right now in Afghanistan. And what the US needs to understand and the rest of the world needs to understand is that once these terrorist havens start taking root in one territory, right now in Afghanistan, because in Pakistan we have successfully managed that these groups do not have a geographical space to operate from. They have their cells here and there, but we are continuously eliminating them all through our IBOs and all that. We haven't needed to go in with full military movement and take over areas, or so, because they do not hold any area. In Afghanistan, they have been allocated areas from where they operate. Once they start expanding in these areas, then it will be there will be a threat to the regional stability. It will not contain itself to some part of Pakistan. No, it will impact the regional stability, and any time it can become a global threat. So that has to be understood by all the stakeholders, that no terrorist organization contains itself to a single point agenda. Their agenda keeps expanding. Similarly, TTP in Pakistan, when it talks about its targets, it talks about targets which are Pakistani security forces, and all those institutions or countries which are friendly with the Pakistani security forces. So that means the scope expands quite widely. So we must impress upon all these stakeholders that it is a regional and global threat. It is not only limited to Pakistan. Pakistan will manage it somehow. Pakistan has been managing it. Pakistan has eliminated these people in the past, and we will eliminate them again. But if they continue to find safe havens inside Afghanistan, it will ultimately become a regional and global threat.
Okay, so what sort of options do you think the US could have in order to impress the Afghan Taliban, in order to specifically contain the Band Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, which has been operating from the Afghan soil to carry out its terror activities in Pakistan?
I think right now it's more economic leverage, because on the humanitarian grounds a lot of support is provided to Afghanistan in terms of providing them foreign exchange and all that, which is for humanitarian support. So that is one aspect, but that is again tricky, because obviously people of Afghanistan should not suffer because of the intransigence of Afghan Taliban. Afghan Taliban have responded to Pakistan that they cannot compromise on their own security, and Pakistan should be looking at its own issues and security. That is, by the way, is like very lame sort of response, because again, if Afghan Taliban are not able to contain TTP's activities, then Pakistan will have to take measures which will go inside Afghanistan one day. Pakistan will not sit back. I can guarantee Afghan Taliban that Pakistan will not sit back, because this cannot continue.
In that sort of a scenario, we have seen authorities in Pakistan also talking about the last resort of having a kinetic operation on the within Afghanistan if the Afghan Taliban don't fulfill their promise. And but the primary focus of the Pakistani authorities has been to engage with them on diplomatic levels, and in order to impress upon them that they need to take some certain specific measures. There were certain options also given to them when we talk about that very important presser by the caretaker Prime Minister Mr. Anwarullah Kakar, also that whether they want to take action by themselves against the Band Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan militants, or they want to hand them over to Pakistan. So if as you already mentioned, that the Afghan Taliban had been continuously denying that the TTP doesn't exist on the Afghanistan soil, and still we keep getting those terror attacks that emanate from the Afghanistan soil. So do you think the United States can help Pakistan in that regard, if Pakistan in case goes for that last resort?
I don't think US will engage itself into any such active active operation. Obviously, US has left this region and it will not be entering in any form.
Okay,
in
so
this
there's
region.
been a number of statements by the State Department that the US is ready to help Pakistan deal with the threat of TTP and terrorism also. So in what
that is
aspects can
that is
Pakistan
when it
expect
comes
that
to
help?
that is when it comes to strengthen Pakistani security forces capacity, capability, training, intelligence sharing, but that will remain inside Pakistan in those terms. The help will come in those terms. It will not be in the shape of active military intervention or something. Intelligence sharing can be there, supplying new equipment can be there, training can be there. All these aspects Pakistan will be negotiating with the US, but that is where this ends.
Right. So what about how crucial is the border security and border management? Right after that gigantic exercise of fencing the Pak-Afghan border over the last many years, Pakistani authorities undertook. Even Pakistan had to sacrifice a lot of lives in that gigantic exercise. Now, there was statement by the State Department also regarding its financial help towards Pakistan in order to maintain that border management and border security. How crucial is that in this particular regard in order to check the movement of any such elements?
Well, I have consistently held a position that if Pakistan and Afghanistan have to function as normal states, border management and border control is a crucial part of it. There cannot be any possibility, as some of our friends within Pakistan have also been arguing that particularly some of the people in KP and Balochistan have been arguing that there should be sort of as free movement as EU, but in EU all people are documented, all people's movement is documented. It's not it's not a border which we do not know. We are not very aware that whether how many people in Afghanistan carry proper identities. So this sort of system can only work in those societies. Coming back to the border control, Pakistan and Afghanistan both need to have a proper border control and border management. That, as I said, that if they have to function as proper states, after they have established protocols of border crossing, passports, visas, everything, after that they can enter into any agreement which facilitates those people who have cross-border trade, who have families straddling both sides of the borders. Those people can be facilitated, but once when everything is documented, the systems are in place, only then it can be done. Before that, border control, border management is the most crucial part of managing relationships between Pakistan and Afghanistan and reducing tensions also. Because if you do not do that, there will be incidents happening and there will always be allegations flying around. So why not do it right now and then decide who can cross, who cannot cross.
Right. So when we talk about the approach that you've already mentioned, the approach of the Afghan Taliban when it comes to the concerns of the Pakistani authorities vis-a-vis the terror attacks that have taken place in the recent past, at this point in time, what could be ideally expected of the Afghan authorities, especially given the fact that they've been looking towards the international community, especially towards their neighbors, for at least that international recognition to become de jure?
Well, as I said, that to do that, they will have to come up with the constitution, which is generally accepted by the larger Afghan society. Whether they do it through a lawyer jirga or whatever the traditional method is, like the last time when there was a constitution.
There should be a formation of an inclusive government.
An inclusive government, and then there should be a process through which the government is installed. If the constitutional the temporary constitutional document they agree to gives a temporary government, okay, which will be the temporary government, how long, after that what will be happening. So, all these are normal state functions, how the governments will be elected, how the governments will come into power, because frankly right now they have they are a conquering army sort of thing in Kabul, right. So, that's where they draw their legitimacy from. They do not draw their legitimacy from any constitution. So, whatever constitution they want to work with, they should come up with that, and then they should on the front of controlling all these organizations, they have to show same kind of resolve which they may have shown when they were fighting against ISAF or NATO or whatever, right. Because again as I said, Afghan Taliban now have to understand that they are running a country. They are not a guerrilla force now. So, to run a country you have to accept responsibility of your own people and responsibility that comes from being part of the community of the nations. If they are not able to comprehend that, then they will be dragging Afghanistan again into some conflict sooner or later.
What keeps them from understanding or comprehending that particular fact that you've just mentioned? You also said that if they had that capacity of fighting against the international troops, why can't they have that very capacity to fight against these terrorist groups?
Well, one of the things is that there are ideological overlaps, right. With TTP, TTP was sort of a host for them here, and now they are TTP's host there, right. So, they have had cooperation in the past. They have linkages which are decades long. So, it is not easy for them to delink from all that, right. So, that is why they keep on asking Pakistan, you should negotiate with them, you should negotiate with them, because they think that if they sort of come down harsh on them or hard on them, then they will be sort of betraying their own ideological bearings. So, this is a very complex issue for them.
Mr. Aniq, Zafar, senior analyst, joining us in the studio. Thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.